Thanks very much, Dee, and welcome everybody. Thanks very much for joining us tonight, and a big shout out to the Integrity Systems Company team and Ben from AgVic as well for joining us tonight. And I hope you're enjoying a good start to spring down there in Victoria, but like us here in New South Wales, you're probably over the COVID restrictions and lockdown. But thanks very much for joining us this evening. So I will just turn off my camera. Can be a little distracting, and hopefully the internet stays with me this evening. So we might just take a look at what we're going to cover off on this evening. First thing we'll do is touch on the importance of the red meat integrity system, and then we'll look at the National Livestock Identification System, so what it means on farm and what you as producers or advisors need to do. And then we'll go step by step through the identification elements of NLIS and then the traceability components. And then George will take us through a live demonstration, and then we'll talk to you a little bit about where you can get plenty of help. So just to start off with, Integrity Systems Company is a wholly owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, and we manage and deliver Australia's red meat integrity system. And that is the system that ensures Australian red meat is safe to eat and fully traceable. It provides on-farm assurance, animal identification and lifetime traceability, and it also underpins the livestock selling system here in Australia, which give confidence to buyers, retailers and consumers. So just to put all of that into context as to why it's so important that we have an integrity system that underpins our red meat industry, the Australian livestock and red meat industry is now a $28 billion sector. So it's a serious contributor to the Australian economy. It employs over 400,000 people across 80,000 businesses and delivers red meat product to 100 global markets all around the world. Now, just as a quick refresher, there are two programs which work together to underpin our industry's food safety and traceability on farm. The first of those is Livestock Production Assurance, or LPA, and it's all about on-farm assurance, covering on-farm management of food safety, animal welfare and biosecurity risks. LPA is the tick of assurance for your product from producer through to consumer, and it demonstrates the professionalism of the industry and underpins market access for Australian red meat. The other program which makes up the red meat integrity system is the National Livestock Identification System, or NLIS, which has been in place for over 20 years now. It's all about identification and traceability. It tracks the location of every animal throughout its life. It's mandatory for producers and endorsed by major producer, feedlot, agent, sale yard and processor bodies. And it's also underpinned by state and territory legislation, and it enhances Australia's ability to track livestock during disease and food safety incidences. Now, there are three other elements which are important aspects of the red meat integrity system. Central to both the programs that I've outlined is the Property Identification Code, or PICs. Now, a PIC is required for registration with both LPA and NLIS. PICs are managed independently by state and territory departments of agriculture, and their incorporation into both of those programs is the only way that traceability and food safety can be managed at a national level. And the two other elements which are really important are record keeping. So there's record keeping across both LPA and NLIS, and they underpin food safety and traceability. And then, of course, it all comes to life, or it all becomes visible through the National Vendor Declaration. And that's where the link between on-farm assurance and traceability comes together for livestock as they move along the value chain. So we've given just a quick refresher about the various elements that make up the red meat integrity system. Now we're going to go into some more detail around the National Livestock Identification System in particular. But Dee, I think we had a quick reminder.
Yeah, folks, just a reminder on the questions. Don't wait until the end to put them in. Put them in the Q&A as soon as they come to mind, because we've got the ISC team and Ben Fay from AgVic to answer them. So pop them in there. If you asked a question in the registration process, pop that in there as well so we can get onto that straight away. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thanks very much, Dee. So the red meat integrity system, it's all connected. So livestock production assurance and the National Livestock Identification System. So the diagram on the right-hand side of the slide there shows how LPA and NLIS together with property identification codes and national vendor declarations and record keeping, all work together to deliver that red meat integrity system. So we're going to take a bit of a look now at the National Livestock Identification System in more detail. So NLIS, what does it actually mean on farm? Well, NLIS combines three elements to enable the lifetime traceability of animals. The first of those is that all physical locations are identified by means of a property identification code, commonly known as a PIC. The second is that all livestock are identified by an NLIS accredited visual or electronic ear tag or device. And the third is that all livestock location data and movements are recorded in the NLIS database. Now, we're now going to go through and cover your role in how you manage each of these different elements practically on farm. So for the National Livestock Identification System, as producers, you need to do a couple of things, but it's important to note that the NLIS is a very big and complex system, and the database certainly can do lots of things. However, if you break it down, there's some core things that as producers you need to do to make sure that you're meeting your requirements as part of the NLIS. Now, the first of those is that you need to keep your NLIS account details up to date. The second is that you need to order and use NLIS tags as identifiers for every animal on your PIC. Now, the required tag types differ a bit between the states and territories, but every animal must be tagged with an accredited NLIS device and can't be moved to another PIC without one, including to another farm, feedlot, sale yard, or processor. You also need to record movements of livestock in the NLIS database. Livestock transfers between PICs must be recorded by transferring the tags in the NLIS database. The NLIS database must be updated within 48 hours of stock moving between PICs, even if they go from one PIC to another PIC that you might own. All producers need to regularly check their own records against the database to ensure that transfers have been completed. And this is really important if you're relying on someone else to make the transfer, such as a livestock agent. You need to check that this has actually happened. And finally, it's also recommended that you do a PIC reconciliation every year to ensure that the database is an accurate record of the devices and the livestock on your property. And then to ensure livestock traceability, from time to time, the NLIS database will issue automated emails when differences or discrepancies occur, and it's really important that you investigate those differences if you are notified. Now, also, we should note there that you need to remember that completing livestock transfers on the NLIS database is actually an auditable requirement of the Livestock Production Assurance Program, and auditors will review NVDs, ENVDs, and NLIS transfers. So I've just taken you through a little bit about NLIS, what it actually means on farm, what you need to do at a really high level as a producer to make sure that you're meeting those requirements as part of the red meat integrity system. But now let's break it down into the three core elements of the National Livestock Identification System. And the first of those was property identification, and that's managed through a property identification code. So what actually is a property identification code, or a PIC? It's an 8-character code that's allocated by an equivalent authority in each state and territory. Now, producers must have a PIC to move livestock on and off a property. It forms the basis of Australia's food safety and traceability programs. Now, PIC numbers rather than properties, such as property name and address, are the basis for all integrity system programs. NLIS relies on PICs to ensure traceability through the supply chain, and NLIS tags and devices are issued to specific PICs and are applied to any livestock born there or livestock that have been moved there and require a replacement tag. And all transfers on the database must be between valid PICs or property identification codes. Now, just a thing to note there about PIC statuses. PICs with any kind of an issue are assigned a status in the NLIS database, and statuses are also assigned to PICs that participate in particular markets, such as the National Feedlot Accreditation Scheme or marketing into the EU. Now, there are differences between states and territories in terms of how PICs are managed. And Dee, I think we've got a question here regarding PICs in Victoria.
Yes, one of those questions that is about how states have different ways of managing things. So we're just going to put this question to Ben Fay from AgVic, Manager of Livestock Traceability. So Ben, in Victoria, so parcels of land can be amalgamated under one PIC. How do producers go about doing that?
Thanks, Deanna. That's right. If you have properties operating in a shire or an adjoining shire, you can certainly have those parcels of land or different properties recorded under the one PIC. They need to operate as one business, but it certainly does make it easier for producers that have land that isn't connected. There's distance between them and they're moving stock backwards and forwards from them. To have those recorded under the one property identification code. To do that, you can go online at pic.agriculture.vic.gov.au, or you can call in on the NLIS, Victorian NLIS helpline, which operates business hours 5 days a week, and talk to our farmer services staff, and they can work through adding parcels of land to your existing PIC, or if you're applying for a new PIC, ensuring that all the parcels of land are recorded under that one PIC.
Great, thanks, Ben. So we'll put those contact details in the post-webinar email that will be coming out to everyone who's registered for tonight's session. But also, if you're putting questions in the Q&A, we're having some really great questions come through. Thank you. We will be sending out a transcript of the answers to those questions as well. So you don't need to worry about trying to get that answer down. We'll send that to you a bit later in the week. Back to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Dee. So we've touched on property identification, which was the first element of the National Livestock Identification System. The second element is animal identification. Now, as animals are bought, sold and moved along the supply chain, they must be tagged with an NLIS accredited tag or device from their property, their PIC of birth. In most cases, this tag will remain with the animal for their entire life. It's an offence to remove an NLIS tag from an animal and apply another tag, and there are different tagging requirements for different species. So cattle, sheep and goats must have an electronic RFID or EID device in Victoria, and this can either be a single ear tag or, in the case of cattle, a rumen bolus visual ear tag combination. Now, for more information about NLIS accredited devices, you can either check out the Integrity Systems Company website and find separate lists for cattle and sheep and goats, but we will also provide more information on these in the post-webinar email. And you can see on the slide there some images of the different sheep and cattle EID devices, but you'll also notice a little integrity insight there. There'll be some of those throughout tonight's session, but breeder tags are used for animals on your PIC, white for cattle and a year of birth colour for sheep and goats, and post-breeder tags are applied to animals when they are no longer on their PIC of birth. So they are orange for cattle and pink for sheep and goats, so that they're easily identified. When it comes to applying NLIS devices to your livestock, if tags are lost or fall out or become defective, then a new tag can be applied. However, if the animal is no longer at its place of birth, then a post-breeder tag must be used, and this indicates that the animal no longer has that complete lifetime traceability. A couple of practical tips there. Don't wait until the truck arrives to find out if tags are missing. Either check the animals in advance or make it a policy to always look for and replace lost tags whenever livestock come through the yards. This also means having a supply of replacement tags on hand, including post-breeder tags if you have any livestock that are not on or have left and then returned to their place of birth, for example. And sale yards will charge for having to apply replacement tags, which can cost up to $50 or more. The integrity insight there, if you're having issues with your tags or with the applicator that you might be using, then absolutely contact the supplier in the first instance. But when it comes to the actual tags, you should also complete a device complaint form and submit that to Integrity Systems Company. So Dee, I think we have another question.
Yep, another question for Ben. Thanks, Kathleen. So Ben, obviously in Victoria, we've had some changes when it comes to EID for sheep in recent years. So can you just remind us what the requirements are? And you've got some important timeframes coming up as well that people should be aware of.
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. That's right. So sheep and goats born after 2017 have had the requirement for an electronic NLIS sheep tag to be put in their ear. In 2019, any Victorian producers introducing sheep and goats from interstate, when those sheep and goats moved off their property, they were required to put a electronic identification NLIS sheep tag in their ear as well. Post-breeder tag, given that they've been introduced onto the property. And from 1 January 2022, all Victorian sheep and goats leaving Victorian property are required to have a electronic NLIS sheep and goat tag in their ear. So for non-vendor bred introduced stock, that would be a post-breeder tag. But for stock that were bred on the pick that they're currently residing on, they can have a breeder tag put in their ears. But yeah, from 1 January 2022, all movements off Victorian sheep and goat movements off a Victorian pick will require a electronic NLIS sheep tag.
So Ben, just so we're clear, because we've probably got a lot of people who might be on that SA Vic border or perhaps the New South Wales Vic border, this is including sheep that are coming from outside of Victoria, coming into Victoria?
Yes, that's right. The if sheep come into Victoria direct to an abattoir or to a sale yard, the abattoir and the sale yard aren't required to put electronic tags in their ears, but where they move on to a Victorian property, the next move off that Victorian property, they're required to tag those with the electronic NLIS sheep tag, either vendor bred or non-vendor bred. But if they're introducing them, clearly they'll have to be using a post-breeder tag to identify them.
Excellent, great. Thanks, Ben. Back to you, Kathleen.
Thanks so much, Dee. So the next little section and bit of information here is, what do the actual numbers on individual electronic devices actually mean? And there certainly are a lot of numbers on EID or RFID tags. So they actually have two different numbers. So the first of the numbers is the NLIS ID, or the visual number printed on the tag. And then they have an RFID, and we will spell that out just once tonight. It stands for Radio Frequency Identification Device. There's an RFID number that is read by the reader. Now, both numbers can be used to individually identify animals on your property. So if you are visually reading tags rather than using a reader, then please be careful. A mistake in reading or typing in a tag number can actually result in errors on the NLIS database. Now, the first 8 characters of the NLIS, or the visual number, are actually the pick the device was issued to. So for a breeder tag, this indicates the pick where the animal was born. And for a post-breeder tag, this indicates what pick the animal was on when the replacement tag was applied. The next 2 letters represent the manufacturer and the type of device. So, for example, B stands for cattle breeder. Don't ask me why. And the third letter after the pick represents the year of manufacture, which also generally is the year that you might have purchased the tag. So it gives you an idea of how old the tag actually is. And just for information, 2021 is the letter S. So just if we give that a practical example, you can see the second row there. You've got the property identification code is the 3ABCD123. Then the manufacturer could be an X, which in this case would be an Allflex. The device type B, so it's a cattle tag, and the year is K. And then you have the serial number after that. Now, those 5 numbers which make up the serial number can actually be customized. So the first can be a letter and the rest can be numbers to something that is relevant, say, to your operation. So if you brand or mark a regular number of calves or lambs each year, then each year's tag can be ordered starting at 1 or whatever number sequence you want, for example. And then this can tell you something about the animal the tag is applied to just from looking at that visual number. However, if you do want to customize those numbers, you need to request this when you order your tags. If you don't request it, the manufacturer might start at 1 each time you order and then progress from there. Now, for cattle, you can also order matching visual management tags when you order your NLIS tag, but these do have to be ordered together and from the same manufacturer. Which brings me to recording livestock movements through the National Livestock Identification System, which is the third element. So let's just revise. The NLIS is made up of 3 core elements. The first is the identification of the physical location, which is through the pick. Then the second is through the identification of livestock through the NLIS approved devices, mostly tags. And then the third element is the NLIS database, which tracks and keeps a record of all livestock movements. So sale yards and processors will usually complete the transfer, but it's still important that the receiver of those animals checks. Selling platforms such as Auctions Plus do not complete the transfers. You should always check with your agent if they are completing the transfer and ask for the upload ID. But that you are responsible for ensuring that the transfer has been completed. So it's highly recommended you create an NLIS account and keep track of what is on the database. And just a reminder there that transfers of livestock moved onto your PIC are checked in an LPA audit. And if you trade in particular regularly, then you should be vigilant in checking that those transfers have been completed on the database. So when it comes to checking your transfer, it's really important that you check every transfer on and off your property has been completed correctly. An error means that the record was not made at all. A warning means that the record was made but needs some fixing. If there is an error or you get a warning email, it's important that you investigate it and correct the error if possible. And for bought-in stock, it's also recommended that you complete a beast inquiry on devices before they leave your PIC to ensure that they are registered to your PIC. And there's also something else that we spoke about earlier, and we'll go into a bit more detail, but it's also important that you do a PIC reconciliation at least once a year, just to make sure that all the livestock and the devices on your property and on your NLIS database are accurate. So just again, it's really important. The most important thing you do is that you check every transfer on and off your PIC, and if there is a difference in the number of devices transferred or any kind of error with the transfer, you investigate it and sort it out straight away. If you get an error, that means that the record wasn't made at all, and a warning means that there was some issues within that transfer that need fixing. Just a bit of a look at some common transfer mistakes. So you can see here, this is let's say it was a cattle, for example, going from PIC A to PIC B and then from PIC B to PIC C. And what's actually occurred here is that when the animals were moved from PIC B to PIC C, that movement was recorded on the NLIS database. However, it became evident that the movement from PIC A to PIC B was not actually recorded on the database. So to enable that transfer from PIC B to PIC C to actually occur, the NLIS retrospectively fills in the gap between PIC A and PIC B. You'll get a warning message generated to indicate the loss of that lifetime traceability, but the database has actually done that systems transfer on the database so that the movement then from PIC B to PIC C can actually occur. Now that's known as a systems transfer. They're important as they allow for transfer of livestock to occur without delay, but they flag through a warning which needs to be fixed later, which is why it's really important that you investigate and fix any errors or warnings when you are notified. The box on the bottom of the screen there, that's an actual screenshot of the NLIS database, and it shows how those system transfers are dealt with by the database. And you can see there that they've got the series of X's, and that means it's a systems transfer. So you can see that that animal was originally from PIC Q2 R0116, and then the tag was issued to that PIC in 2017. At some point, that animal was moved off this PIC, but the transfer wasn't completed. And then as it was moved between the two PICs later on, and the producer actually did the transfer, that meant that the system transfer had to be occurred to get that animal onto the correct PIC before that final transfer was in place. So that's just a simplified, I guess, explanation of what can happen when transfers aren't completed. Conscious that it probably is a little bit of information there, and it is quite complex. However, we do provide some information in the post-webinar materials about that. So I guess the key message there is that if you don't have an NLIS account, we really strongly encourage you to get one. NLIS accounts are free to open and operate. Now, instructions for setting up an account are on this slide, which we'll be sending you after the webinar. So you can come back to this information if you need help in setting up an account. And just a little integrity insight there is that once submitted, your account request will need to be approved by your state or territory department to match the NLIS account with your PIC register details, but that this process can actually take a couple of days. And when it comes to accessing your NLIS account, once your account is activated, you will receive a user ID and you use the password you set when registering. You can log in at the NLIS website, or you can link, and we encourage you to link your NLIS account to your MyMLA account for much easier access. So that will mean that you'll only need one username and password if you link all your integrity accounts to your MyMLA account. Now, just a note on the NLIS database that there are a couple of different, I guess, user interfaces. There is the, if you are familiar with, there is either the original or there's also a producer dashboard. If you are using the producer dashboard and you're comfortable doing so, then you can continue to. However, just be aware that the dashboard does sometimes have issues generating reports. And if you are having any problems when using the dashboard, then please switch to the original on the home page, which is the preferred option for many database users. And George will just give us a quick demonstration of that when he shows us through the database here shortly. So for most producers, there are several key things that you might need to perform on the NLIS database when you do start using it, or if you're using it already. And as I said earlier, the NLIS database will do a lot of things, but there are just a couple of key activities that you should be very familiar with, and we'll take you through those in the live demo. And they are how to move livestock onto or off a property identification code, and that's or a PIC, and that's by a couple of different ways, either through a type-in method or a file upload method. Also check transfers have been completed and record the upload ID. Conduct the transfer correction, run a few reports in the NLIS database, and how to complete a PIC reconciliation. So I am now going to hand over to George Basher, who, as Dee said, is an absolute guru in the NLIS database, and he's going to take us through a practical demo tonight, including how to log into the database, how to access help, completing that transfer, and then running a report. So over to you, George.
Welcome, everybody. So, yeah, my name's George. I know a little bit about the system. I've been here for 22 years and created most of what you see on the screen. So this is the homepage, or the welcome page. And from here, you can register. Kathleen said you register, and we check the PIC register, and we create your account. And we'll log in as a producer. Up in your user ID and your password. And this is what we call the original site. So like Kathleen said, there's the dashboard, which a fair few Victorians do use, but we prefer using this one to show everyone. It's the most common one used. So we'll go through this at the moment. So we've got a change button here. And the whole idea of this is to keep your details up to date. So click on change. The only details you can change are your contact details. So email address, phone number, the most important things for us to be able to contact you with. When you've made those changes, continue, and then finally send that information, the updated information, takes you back to this front page. So you've updated your email, which is very important. It's how we contact you all the time. So just make sure that's up to date. I always like to hide the header, give us more room. But before I do that, I'll show you this help tool. So click on help. At the moment, we're looking at sheep individual. So click on help. And these are all the help tools we've got currently to help you through using NLIS. You're working on cattle, change that to cattle. And they're all the guides. We are working on all of these guides. We're converting them from the old PDF to things that are far more intuitive and easier to use, like YouTube clips. So that's where you get all your help from. Back home. I'll hide this header now, just to give us more room. On cattle, that's the first thing you want to work on. And now we have a drop down. Now there's in 3 sections. You need to make some changes, or click on the change. Notify the database of the action part, or the doing part. And then we've got the reports. It's just the login or the viewing. So this is where we make changes to the database. And by the changes, that's setting statuses to tags, moving them on your property or off your property. And the report is just having a look to see what's happened with your PIC, all the details on tags. We'll start off with a cattle one. So we'll go to livestock that have moved to my property. And we'll do that because that is your responsibility. When you purchase livestock, cattle in this case, we purchase cattle directly from another producer that's not through a sale yard. It is your responsibility to do it. So log in, select cattle, livestock moved onto my property, and we're going to do it on screen. Type in the details. 5 fields we need. First field are the tag numbers. So you can copy and paste just like that. So it was just a copy and paste. You can type them in manually. If you use a reader, you can scan the tags, and then the reader itself will link into your computer, or you can download them and paste them in. So I'm using the NLIS ID, which is the visual tag number. Coming from QAZZ, these are my picks that I use. I go into my other property. I have a waybill number. And they move today. We continue. It's now giving us confirmation. So the NLIS database will always step you through. And the last step, which is this one, is confirming. Do you really want to move these 4 tags from this property, with this waybill number on this date? You say yes. It's gone. Let's get the database ready and given us a number. And that's our upload number. You get an email in your inbox saying that you've sent us a file, so an acknowledgement email, and within a minute or two, have the response giving you outcome. So we'll click on View My Transaction History. This is today, the 6th to the 6th. Everything we've done today. There's the file with the status of complete, which means this file has gone through. So it's the producer transfer we just did, manual upload, and status of complete. So that's how you transfer livestock, or cattle in this case, onto your property. Back home. Now we'll look at movement. So we'll go down and say, give me a view of all the reports. And we're going to look for movements onto the property. Livestock transferred onto property. We move them onto this property. We move them today. And there's the list of 4 cattle, 4 tags we just transferred. This is the source pick, so it tells you where they've come from. So if you need to go back and do any work, you need to show to your LPA auditor you've done the transfers. It's all there. You can go back. This is what's moved on this month. Nothing but those 4. So they're the only 4 movements we've had in this time period. So we select from a drop-down menu, property we want to look at, a date range, and there's the movement. So we've done the movement and we've checked that it's been done. If someone else has done the movement for you, you can still check by going online and doing this. If you buy cattle through a sale yard, go online. If you bought them last month, you bought them in August, select the date, display whatever was purchased in that month and being transferred on the database. So there are a few of the questions and answers. People asking what is not done. How do you know if they are done? This is how you check if a transfer has occurred. At home, another report that people ask for and use quite often, generator reports. Active devices. These are all the devices in this property. There's the list of them. You can export this. I click on export, sort by into these fields. You look for one in particular by date. These don't have a transfer date because they were tags purchased for this property. And the export function just allows you to copy it into your Excel file. That's the cattle movements. So we've moved them, we've checked them, and just got a list of all current tags on our property. Look at the next bit, which is sheep individual. You'll notice there's sheep mobs as well. That's mainly for non-Victorians. We're going to do the same thing. Livestock moved to my property. Details in manually on screen. I've got a list of tags here. Populated, you just copy that. Paste them in. They're coming onto my property. No, they're going to this property, sorry. From this one. Copy and paste. NVD number. We'll move them today. There's one extra piece of information required, and that's the number of head. And the reason why that's included is there's only 19 tags here. There's 20 animals. That's because we bought these animals from another state. And they, as Ben mentioned, they don't have to have RFID tags or EID tags. They can have visual tags. So if there's only one visual tag, then you'd only put one number in there. You'd only have one of these. In this case, there's 19, there's 20 head. So we know 20 animals moved on your property, but only 19 had a tag. Continue. Exact same thing again. Confirmation. Are you sure you want to move these animals from here to here with this waybill number on this date? And there were 20 head all up. Send again. A confirmation plate ID number. You would have received an email. View my transaction. Same thing. Looking at the same date range because it's only happened today. Now we've got a lot more here. These ones are because we ran reports. These are the reports we ran earlier. It's just telling us that these are the reports we've run. These are all the things, activities, actions, interactions with the database today. And that's the last one, manual mob status of complete. So we've uploaded now sheep. We've moved 19 head. We can do the same thing. Go back in here, look at some reports. View journal reports. Livestock transferred onto pick. And there's the list of 19. We just uploaded now. We did say there were 20 animals, 19 were tags. Because it's the species of sheep. We know it is because of the ESP part. S, as Kathleen alluded to in one of her early slides, the S is for sheep, breeder sheep tags. P is the year the tag was made. So that's a movement. And we look at these tags were originally on this property, QCZZ 8888. Again, it's my test properties. It is now on QAZZ 7777. So that's the movement on using the sheep, which is slightly different to cattle. In other states, they use the mob base, which they don't have any of these tag numbers. What they end up doing is uploading the NVD image. So this is a lot easier, a lot more traceable. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you, George. George, just while you're there, we've just had a question. What does the LT mean? You able to just comment on that one?
It's an LT is lifetime traceable. And there were some on there that were showing as not lifetime traceable because they were actually post-breeder devices. So when Kathleen also showed, so there's two ways you can have lifetime traceable. There's lifetime traceable, which means the animal was a breeder tag and we know the whole history. And the other scenario is when it's a post-breeder device and you put them onto animals that have come onto your property. So if an animal, typically sheep, come onto your property and they don't have an NLIS tag, they've got to be put in with an RFID tag. And from this new property, so they don't match. With cattle, if you buy animals with a tag, the tag falls out, you put an orange coloured post breeder, and if you link it to the old tag, it keeps this traceability. If you can't link it to the old tag, then that animal loses its lifetime traceability. So LT stands for lifetime traceable.
Great. Thanks, George. So Deb, hopefully that answers your question, but if you've got any others, just pop it in the Q&A button and we'll get the team to answer it. Right, Kathleen, we can see your screen, so back over to you.
Thanks very much, Dean. Thanks, George, for a great demo there. That was really useful. Excuse me. So let's move on. I've mentioned a PIC reconciliation a couple of times this evening. We recommend that you do complete a PIC reconciliation every year. And basically what a PIC reconciliation is that it's a stock take of all the electronic NLIS devices on a property. And the PIC reconciliation process identifies discrepancies between the total number of electronic devices physically on a property and the number of electronic devices registered to that property on the NLIS database. Now, as we mentioned earlier, all devices or tags purchased on your PIC, so those that are attached to livestock and those not yet used, are considered active tags. The database does not differentiate between devices and tags that are actually in animals' ears, for example, and those that are still in the drawer or in the cupboard. So by completing a PIC reconciliation regularly, that helps ensure that all the transfers are being completed correctly and that there is no or minimal discrepancy in your active devices registered to your PIC. Now, producers supplying the EU market are actually required to complete a PIC reconciliation as part of that EU accreditation process. Now, just a couple of other things. Don't attempt a PIC reconciliation until you're actually familiar with using the database. And when you are ready, or if you're a regular user of the NLIS database now, then I'd encourage you to check out our how-to guides, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, to help you through that PIC reconciliation process. But as I said before, the integrity insight there is that all devices and tags purchased on your PIC, including those not being used, are still considered active tags. Now, unused tag numbers must still be included in the PIC reconciliation process. So that's tags that you've got, but you haven't necessarily applied to livestock yet. I did just want to touch on making the NLIS database work for you. So the NLIS database, it's a big and complex database. It has a lot of information in there, and it's a really quite a powerful set of data attached to individual animals that make up and their movements that make up a large industry here in Australia. So it does lots of things. It talks about all livestock needing tags and those livestock being on farm. It also records those livestock movements. It also keeps track of any spare or unused tags as well. But what the database actually does that people may not realise is that, and it's very easy to take for granted, the potential of the NLIS and what it does for producers. But it's not only about providing a national identification system that is consistent in terms of how it collects information nationally in terms of how animals are identified, properties are identified, and then those movements are recorded. But the NLIS database also means that you can take control of your business, essentially. You can keep track of livestock movements, and if anything was to go wrong at any time, then you've actually got that information at your disposal to make decisions. And it's really important to be responsible for your business and your livestock, not only in the case of auditing, but also to make sure you can stand by what you sell and ensure that the Australian market remains renowned for good traceability. And it's this traceability that provides more market opportunities for not only your business, but for the Australian livestock industry. And it's the NLIS and its ability to trace those individual animals that gives us that capability, I guess, in Australia to be able to act in emergency situations. So things like emergency animal diseases, in trade situations where we might have a chemical residue violation, but also in instances of natural disasters as well. So if your NLIS database is up to date, then in the unfortunate circumstance that you're dealing with a flood or bushfires and the like, you are able to keep track of and have a record of the animals that were actually on your property at the time. But the other thing that the NLIS does, which is quite exciting, is that it provides a connection to further data analysis for businesses to grow and improve. If you ensure that all of your livestock and tag numbers are in the database, you can connect this information to other software that's available or other data sets, and that enables you, I guess, the ability to track important parameters and then use that data to make on-farm decisions, which of course can help you improve productivity and profitability. And by linking attributes and information about individual animals to a number provides a really powerful opportunity for using that data to accelerate production outcomes. So the more that you measure, the more that you can manage your animals. So, and it's, I mean, what does that actually mean at a practical level? Well, it's actually only because of the National Livestock Identification System that you're actually able to receive individually identified carcass feedback direct from your processor. And it's this linkage that's allowed for the development of feedback systems like Meat Standards Australia, like Livestock Data Link, and also provides that essential information for generating estimated breeding values or Australian sheep breeding values, and also is really useful when it comes to capturing genetic information around carcass traits, but also enables you through that identification of the individual animal, means that you can not only be meeting your integrity requirements from traceability, but that will also speak to other programs and software that might be capturing genetic or production information about a particular animal. So yes, whilst the NLIS database seems like a cumbersome and big complex thing, there's plenty more to it than just providing that traceability for emergency animal disease. So just to, I guess, summarise before we finish up this evening, just where we started, what does the actual National Livestock Identification System mean on farm? It actually combines 3 elements, and those 3 elements combine to enable the lifetime traceability of animals. And they are the physical location through the property identification code, animal identification through the NLIS visual or electronic ear tag or device, and then livestock location data and movements that are recorded in the NLIS database. As I've said, the whole system is connected. It absolutely talks to livestock production assurance and national vendor decks on record keeping and things. The NLIS is much bigger than just traceability, and there certainly are lots of opportunities for use on farm. But if you simplify it down into the key things that you actually need to do to make sure that you're meeting your integrity requirements and therefore able to stand by the product that you sell, there are a couple of key things you need to do, and they are to keep your online account up to date, to continue to order and use NLIS tags as the identifiers for every animal on your pick. You need to record the movements of livestock in the NLIS database. You need to regularly check your records against the database to ensure that those transfers have been registered and completed on the database. And we recommend that you do that pick reconciliation every year. And certainly if you do receive an email with a warning or an error message from Integrity Systems Company, that you act and try and rectify those mistakes as soon as possible. And with that in mind, it really is important that you keep those contact details up to date in the system. And don't forget that those livestock transfers on the database are an auditable requirement as part of LPA. Now, I will just close out in providing you some information on where to get some more information tonight. And we are about to launch tomorrow, actually, through our monthly e-newsletter, Integrity Matters, a suite of new how-to guides. So it's all about providing help to navigate the NLIS database. And there are a series of step-by-step how-to guides, which include videos, PDFs, and website content as well. So they're available, and we'll provide the link to that in the post-webinar email as well. You can check out the Integrity Systems Company website. There's lots more information on there and links off to other resources. The NLIS website that George took you through, which included a range of tech tips and help items on there as well, are really useful. I've already talked about Integrity Matters. It's our monthly newsletter. It's due to hit inboxes tomorrow. If you don't receive Integrity Matters, then please subscribe on our website or contact us through the customer service team or on email, and we'll make sure that we add you to the list for integrity matters, and keep an eye out for the new NLIS how-to guides and also a new suite of LPA record keeping templates, which you can complete digitally now as well. We're on all the usual social and digital channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where we've got a number of really great digital assets and resources, animations and videos as well, which will help you with all your integrity requirements. And just before I hand back to Dee, just a little disclaimer there, and particularly with the National Vendor Deck, that it is a declaration, it is a legal declaration. We can't do it for you, your livestock agent can't do it for you, but we're absolutely here to help and provide you with plenty of information to make it as easy as possible for you to meet those integrity requirements and stand by what you sell. But that's it from me, Dee. Happy to hand back to you, and the team and I are happy to take any questions as well.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, George. Lots of great info in that. Now, a few things before we wrap up. So we've got a few minutes where we're going to take a few questions. I am going to put a last call for questions. If you've got anything that you want to pop in the Q&A, now is the time. So please do that, because we're getting close to the end. And you'll note next door to the Q&A, there's a little chat box there. So I'm just going to draw your attention to that, because we've just put in the evaluation survey in that box. So if you're able to click on that link, that'll take you to a survey page. And if you can give us your thoughts, feedback on the session, topics that you'd like to see in future, that would be awesome. We'd really love your feedback. It's short, sharp and shiny, I promise. Only a few questions. Now, questions for the team. So we're going to come back to Ben Fay from AgVic. Ben, got a few questions here for you that were asked in the registration process. Now, one that AgVic gets a lot is about where you need to update your details. So if you have to update your details, can you just remind everyone on all the places where that needs to happen?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks. Updating your property identification code details is extremely important. It allows us to contact people, whether in relation to disease, food safety, or emergency events that occur. So very keen to ensure that all property identification codes have the correct details. People ordering tags through the online tag ordering system that Agriculture Victoria runs, they can access their PIC details, including contacts, mobiles, address points. If they've added or removed parcels of land, they can update them online. And importantly, add email addresses in or change them if they have changed. And I think, Deanna, one of the important things is to remember, if you update your PIC details, probably try and remind yourself to check if you need to update your NLIS database account details or your LPA details, or vice versa. If you're updating your LPA account or your NLIS account, just have a think about whether those details all need to be updated in your property identification code register as well. So you can go online at pic.agriculture.vic.gov.au, or you can type in Victoria Property Identification Code or Agriculture Victoria and PICs, and it will take you to the AgVic page, or you can call our hotline, and the team there manages the updating and applications of PICs on a regular basis, so it can help you out with any queries you have, or do the updates over the phone for it. There is paper-based system as well. If you'd like to get a paper-based system, you can fill out any changes on that. But there's three methods that you can follow, and hopefully producers are happy to access one of those three methods to make sure they're up to date.
Great, thanks, Ben. So we'll include those contact details in the post-webinar email just to make it easy for everyone. Ben, we had a couple of questions around tags and readers. So, so just quickly, how do you best manage lost tags? And I assume that means if an animal has lost a tag.
Yeah, certainly. If an animal has lost tags, I think the important thing there is to ensure that you tag it with the correct tag, depending on where it was born. If it's still on the property of birth, so you bred the animal, it hasn't moved, then you can put a breeder tag in its ear. If it's an introduced animal, you need to ensure that you put a post-breeder electronic NLIS sheep tag in its ear, or cattle tag. But post-breeder being the main point there for introduced livestock. And if you happen to find the tag, you can certainly link the old tag with the new tag that you're putting on, and that's done through the NLIS database. But the main part is to ensure that all animals are tagged before they leave your property. And so if you do find one untagged, if you're unsure about whether it was one new bred or one that was introduced, I would recommend you put a post-breeder tag in. If you know it was an introduced animal, definitely put a post-breeder tag in. But just ensure that you check them all, and if they do need tags, put some tags in their ears.
Great, thank you. And also we had a question, what's the best, cheapest / most compatible portable EID tag reader? So obviously you're not making recommendations on various brands or whatever, but where would people go to get that information, and can they actually borrow tag readers?
Yeah, certainly it is a big question. I think one of the key things there is understanding what you want to do with the reader. Wand readers work very well to connect into any Bluetooth device, your tablets, your computers or your phones, but there are panel readers that are set up to manage significant numbers of animals running through either weigh crates or auto drafters. So I think doing a bit of research, certainly talking to your local stock agent or your local merchandise store. A lot of stock agents have readers and will use them either at sale yards and or for on-farm sales or auctions. So they will have an idea of which ones work well. And as I said, certainly contacting the manufacturers of them and asking what features they have, and seeing which one best fits the reason why you're purchasing a reader is a key part of that. Some readers are available through the Agriculture Victoria offices. You can check with your local staff at the local AgVic office, but that's not across all of our offices. But certainly borrowing one and trying one, even if you chat to your neighbours, is probably the best way of finding out which one's best suited to your business.
Great, thanks Ben, thanks for your insights there. We'll let you hop back into the Q&A to finish off the last few questions that are there. Now we've got a couple of questions for Dr. Don Colantonio, and Don is NLIS Product Manager with Integrity Systems Company. So Don, just to recap, what does ISC recommend if the buyer does not do the transfer?
Okay, Dee, that's a good question. We've had that a couple of times tonight, so it's certainly worth repeating. First of all, the obligation is on the person receiving the cattle. So if you're selling, I mean, that's great, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your NLIS details are clean. So there's a couple of things you can do. If you have been using an agent, you could always have a chat to them. If you're using an agent, just make sure that you know what the deal is with the agent. Some agents will scan and will upload the information into the NLIS, and that's a really good service they provide. But as long as that's the agreement you have with them. If you know who's purchased the livestock, you might give them a gentle reminder. If those two things don't work, you could always ring the staff at the Victorian DPI. They may be able to help you. If all that fails, you could always go into your NLIS account and take the animals off your pick.
Okay, thank you, Don. We also had a lot of questions in the registration about people only having a small number of stocks. So some people might have been using them to keep grass down, or just only run a small number. So what's your comment, Don, in terms of whether all of this applies to people that don't have many stock?
Yeah, Dee, that's a really good question. The rules are the same for everyone, and whether you've got one lamb or one calf or 100,000, the rules are the same. So If you move, if you receive livestock, then the onus is on you to notify the database. And if I could just use a COVID example, which I've been doing a lot in the last 12 months, the lockdown that's happening in New South Wales and Victoria was caused by one limo driver. So one animal, particularly if that animal is going through a sale yard, can cause tens of thousands of animals to become infected. So if you've just got the one or few animals, the good news is you probably won't be using the database very often, just once or twice. So you're going to get off nice and lightly, but you still do need to record the transfer.